Welcome back, and today I'm breaking down the 5 performance principles I've learned after a decade in nutrition. This is backed by physiology, real data, and some common fucking sense as always. In the performance nutrition space, I actually have probably been in the performance nutrition space for at least the last 20. I am an ex-athlete myself, an ex-Division 1 and professional hockey player. So this is really how I got into sports nutrition in the first place, is I needed it for myself, right? This is actually kind of what led me down the road of nutrition originally, is that when I started in college, really I had a really bad first year and I was upset about it. I'm a very competitive person and I was looking for a competitive advantage, right? So obviously I got in the gym, I kept practicing my hockey, but I really found nutrition as a way to set myself ahead. That was just something that other people weren't doing. And even in today's world, right, like with sports, there's still a million athletes out there that aren't optimizing and taking advantage of their nutrition. And honestly, they're probably doing themselves a disservice in terms of performance, but some are just so damn good naturally that, they can get away with it. It doesn't mean they wouldn't be better if they didn't focus more on sports nutrition specifically. There's a science to this. There's a reality that the more you focus on your performance nutrition, the more performance you will get. So, as I've said in the reels, and if you're here for my short form content, I want to save you thousands of dollars in random supplements you don't need. I want to save you 10 years of low energy workouts. I want to save you a lifetime of thinking that your genetics are what's the problem when it's not, right? There's genetics play a very small role in this thing. Epigenetics is the key here, and epigenetics is the lifestyle aspect of everything, right? So with all that being said, I'm trying to keep these quick, so let's fucking go. Number one, calories aren't optional. They are the foundation. I think this is the biggest thing that people don't understand. Just whether you're an athlete or a weekend warrior, or you're just trying to feel better, have more energy. Most people nowadays, unfortunately, due to social media, they're doing this on a restrictive process, right? Like people are trying to restrict the most they can possibly restrict and feel the best they can possibly feel. But those two don't live in the same world, right? Ideally, what we need to do is we need to figure out how much food you can consume while still achieving the goal that you want to achieve, right? So if that is optimal performance, you're probably going to have to eat a shitload of food. Michael Phelps, I looked it up, it wasn't 7,000 calories, it was 10,000 calories a day. And he wasn't doing it from the healthiest foods on the planet because he couldn't, right? Try to eat 10,000 calories worth of grilled chicken and salads and sweet potatoes and let me know how that goes, right? So you're going to have to find that balance of healthy, nutrient-dense foods and calorie-dense foods, right? If we want to go optimizing in terms of performance nutrition. Also, this is the biggest thing I wish I could go back in time and do, is literally, like, there were so many nights riding the bus after a game when I was playing professional. That's when I really got very restrictive with my own nutrition, and it did me a massive disservice. But, there were so many nights where, we're coming in off a game, you've just been playing for 3 hours, you're expending a ton of energy, and I was ordering like a grilled chicken salad or something stupid, right? All the guys around me are eating pizzas and sandwiches and burgers and fries and whatever, wherever we were ordering from. So yeah, if I could go back in time, honestly, I would have had more pizza, I would have had more burgers, I would have had more sandwiches, I would have enjoyed the eating process more, because again, why? Because that's calories, and calories are your fuel source. Calories are your energy. So I always say this for anybody who's an athlete or who's just trying to optimize performance and energy levels. When in doubt, just eating is a better option than not eating. If we're looking for energy and performance optimization, we need calories, we need energy. If we're going strictly performance focused, calories are the king, energy is the king of our equation. Even if they are not the highest quality or most nutrient dense energy options, they are still going to be better than not having energy into the system. Obviously, I know not everybody that's listening to this is going to be a high level athlete, so you're sitting here saying, yeah, okay, that's great, but I can't be cranking a burger and fries every day and think I'm doing the best thing for myself nutritionally. And that's the truth, right? So like I mentioned there, you got to find that level that still aligns with the goals that you want, right? So obviously I'm sitting here 15 years later. I am no longer a professional athlete. I am very much a working stiff that goes and sits in an office 10 hours a day, right? So the dietary process has changed a little bit, but I'm still aiming for that upper limit so that I can look, feel, function my best every day, perform really well in the gym, and then go to work and do what you got to do. You may not have as much leeway with the the higher calorie foods like pizzas and burgers and whatnot, but you definitely want to find your upper limit in terms of how much high quality food you can put into the body. Feel your best, get the best nourishment, right? Like I mentioned with this restrictive process, everybody now is like, how long can I fast? How many days can I go without eating? How can I do this water fast and all this bullshit? Or just thinking that you can't eat carbohydrates or whatever all day because they're bad for you, or they'll make you fat, or they'll spike your insulin. We've taken a very restrictive mindset to nutrition recently, and I think what we need to do is we need to unravel that, we need to unwind that, and really what you want to do is you want to take a nourishment focus as opposed to a restriction focus. So from a calorie standpoint, you can eat a pile of vegetables, you can eat berries, you can eat fruits, even lean proteins and simple carbohydrates and things like that. They're still only 4 calories per gram, and they're very filling, right? So what we want to do is we want to focus on like filling the plate, filling the body with the most nourishing food we can possibly consume. Also, this is going to provide us with some really high quality calories, right? Calories are the king, calories are the energy source, and if we can do that, we're going to find ourselves in a much better position than if we're thinking about like, oh, well, if I don't eat till 2 p.m. and then I have like an apple or maybe like a handful of nuts, and then I can go home and I can have a salad for dinner or whatever. Like, that's not how you build energy. That's not how you build muscle. That's not how you build performance. That's literally not even how you nourish your body properly. It's impossible to get enough of your daily required nutrients in with an approach like that. Number one here, calories are the king. Always keep that in mind. Depending on who you are, what your goal is, what your needs are in terms of, fitness and wellness and whatnot, the calorie is still the king, right? So figure out a way to make this work within your upper limit. And if you can do that, again, the energy is going to go way up. You're going to feel amazing every day. The vitality is going to go up. And then that allows you to push it harder in the gym or wherever it is that you're trying to push. And in that case, it's just going to be a win-win situation. Now, moving on to number 2. I've learned that carbs have become your best friend when performance matters. And this is the truth, okay? Like I mentioned here, right now, there's this push for low carb and carbs are bad. At the end of the day, you look at performance nutrition across the board, it is going to recommend that more carbohydrate is going to be better for performance. Even if you look at the highest level elite endurance athletes, like marathoners and people doing super endurance sports and things like that, they're aiming for 100 plus grams of carbohydrate per hour when they're exercising, okay? So if they're doing a marathon, they're aiming for 300 grams of carbohydrate throughout the duration of just for their race. That's not how many carbohydrate they're eating before, how many carbohydrate they're eating after. So really, when we're thinking about performance, nothing will tank intensity faster than that low carb approach, and especially like as your heart rate goes up, right? So the easiest way to think about like carbohydrate utilization during exercise is that as the heart rate climbs, the need for energy increases exponentially. So the faster the heart rate's going, the faster your body needs continuous energy. All right. The easiest way to get that energy that it needs is to pull from carbohydrate, right? Carbohydrate is the fastest fuel source that the body has available. So, dietary fats, those take longer. There's extra steps involved to metabolize and turn that fat into energy. Carbohydrate is a quick process where the body can just pull those carbs right into circulation, use them right away, create ATP out of your carbohydrate or whatever Krebs cycle. The carbohydrates obviously can get pulled into circulation a lot faster, and we have more readily available storage of those carbohydrates, right? So like when we're eating carbohydrate throughout the day, typically what's happening is they're getting metabolized, digested, absorbed. They're getting stored in the muscle and the liver as something called glycogen. So now as I start to use my body and my heart rate goes up, where your body's going to pull energy from first is those glycogen stores. So it's going to pull from the muscle, it's going to pull from the liver, and then it's also going to be utilizing sugar from your blood to restock essentially that glycogen. All right, so that's the preferred fuel source when you're in the middle of exercise. So basically, this is the situation here, right? Is that the carbs give the fast fuel, fats give the slower fuel. So it doesn't mean that we can't have dietary fats. And this is not a 100% and 0% situation. Like, unless you're doing like an all-out sprint and you're doing something that's like super glycolytic, where your heart rate is very high, then you're probably predominantly running off carbohydrate. But if you're just doing like a decently hard workout, you'll be pulling from some carbs, you'll be pulling from some fats. But again, predominantly carbohydrate is going to be the main fuel source here. So we want to make sure we have that on board. So that's the really important thing to understand, is that even if you do want to be somebody who's monitoring their carb intake, being on a little bit of a lower carb diet, or using that lower carb as a strategy for calorie management, whatever it might be, you're still going to want to make sure you have adequate glycogen storage, which means you need to consume carbohydrate throughout the day. And you really want to focus in on that pre-workout carbohydrate ingestion, because ideally we want to have those carbs on board when we need them most, right? So even if you're on a calorie count or you're trying to do a lower carbohydrate diet, you want to make sure you plug those carbs in when they can be utilized most efficiently, and that's going to be pre-workout, right? With that information known, I think it's really important to understand that if, again, this is a performance-based podcast episode, right? Like, I'm talking here about how do we max out your performance? How do we have you walking around feeling your best, performing your best, being the most nourished, going to the gym, dominating workouts, and like very performance focused here, right? So if you are performance focused, you're gonna need carbohydrate in the diet. And I will argue this till the day I die, being performance focused is also gonna get you the leanest and the strongest, right? Because typically the leanest person is not that person you see like half-assing it, a shitty workout with like a little bit of an elliptical cardio before, and then they go and they lift some like moderately heavy kind of light weights, and they kind of go through the motions for 60 minutes and then walk out of the gym without a sweat. The people who are the leanest, the strongest, the most ripped, the highest performers, I think of like, well, now like high rocks people, CrossFit, sprinters, things like that. These people are ultra fit and super jacked and ripped because they fucking push it. They push their bodies to the limit, right? So if you think that these people are achieving these incredible body compositions and these incredible performance parameters because they just eat salad and fast for 90% of their life, it's not happening, right? These people are fueling and then they're performing, and that combination of fuel and performance is what takes your body composition to that next level, right? So if you're somebody sitting here like myself who really wants body composition and that's your primary like outcome that you're after, like you're just very aesthetically driven, then you got to think like an athlete, right? Like you got to push it in the gym and you got to push it with the food, right? Fuel, nourish, and then perform like a champ and push your body hard, and then there's where you get the response. You don't get the response from like severe restriction and half-ass shitty workouts. So number 2, carbs become your best friend when performance matters. They are kind of the king of the situation in terms of that elevated performance, enhanced performance when your heart rate is high. Moving forward, if you got to introduce a little bit more carbohydrate into the diet for performance reasons, this is the way to do it. Now moving on to number 3, creatine and beta-alanine absolutely boost performance. A lot of people are still kind of not super clear on the whole creatine situation. They think that creatine is maybe a little bit of a steroid or a drug of some sort, right? Couldn't be further from the truth. Creatine is just a collection of a couple amino acids. Your body makes it readily, but just doesn't make it in a high enough quantity to be super helpful. Also, you'll get it through food, but again, you're not going to get enough through food to make it super helpful. Unless you're eating pounds of red meat or chicken or turkey or whatever, fish throughout the day, you're not getting enough creatine from diet. Easy to supplement. It's the most widely studied, trusted supplement. Very little downside, very much just all upside with creatine. Take your 5 grams a day and move on. And then beta-alanine, also another great performance booster here. This is more for endurance-based athletes, all right? So beta-alanine is a great endurance performance booster, but with both of these supplements, you need to take them for a prolonged period of time, and you need to take them consistently. They are not stimulants. That's the important thing to understand. A lot of people are taking creatine and being like, oh yeah, I feel amazing after I take my creatine. It's not really honestly how it works. Placebo effect is strong. If you feel great after you take it, then great, but that's probably placebo, right? Same with beta-alanine. It's in a lot of pre-workouts because it makes you feel tingly, right? So you get that tingly feeling from the beta-alanine and you're like, oh man, I'm all jacked up. Creatine and beta-alanine need to be taken for a prolonged period of time. Both of them need about a month to settle in and saturate your tissues and your cells, and then you start getting the performance benefits of these products. Also, when you're not taking them consistently, you are not going to get the consistent benefit, okay? This is kind of like, I don't know, watering your grass in the summer, right? Like if you water your grass every day, it'll stay nice and green. If you water it, once a week or something, you're not really going to get much there, right? This is kind of the situation with these two supplements, is they just need to be taken consistently. And once they've saturated the tissues, then you get the performance enhancement there, right? So it's actually a nice little combination because creatine is more for high intensity, like basically the first 5 to 10 seconds of like if you're doing anything really high intense or you're doing like really heavy sets of exercise, you might get an extra rep or two. And then that's where you get that enhanced fitness from the creatine, right? So the creatine kind of covers you at the beginning with the more high intensity stuff. And then the alanine actually covers you on the back end with the endurance, right? So the alanine is better for people who are doing a lot of like long duration sports, like again, like the high rocks or the CrossFit, or if you're a runner, you're going to get more of a benefit from like obviously anything beyond that first 10 seconds of high intensity type stuff, right? So the combo of creatine and alanine are great because they literally cover both ends of the fitness spectrum, right? You've got the high intensity stuff with the creatine, you've got the more endurance based stuff with the alanine, and from there you get a really nice pairing. Now working our way down to number 4, caffeine. Now this is the stimulant, right? Caffeine is the go-to when you need the immediate performance bump. So unlike creatine and beta-alanine, caffeine actually works acutely. So you drink the caffeine, you get the performance bump right away, all right? 3 milligrams per kilogram before training is a great place to start, all right? So for me, I always use myself as an example because it's pretty easy. I'm about 100 kilograms. So around 300 milligrams of caffeine. That is a really nice level. It's a high level. That'll kind of hit you. You'll be alert. You'll feel good. But most important thing to understand here, caffeine, it doesn't really jack you up, right? It can give you that little jittery feeling. It can make you feel more focused and more wired. But really the main function of caffeine is that it blunts fatigue. It blocks that adenosine receptor that creates fatigue essentially, right, as it builds up, right? So caffeine blunts that fatigue response. It doesn't really apply like the juice as I have written here. The juice is coming from the carbs, okay? So the juice is coming from the calories, the juice is coming from the carbs. If we don't have calories and carbs on board, we're gonna have a hard time performing in the gym with just a shit ton of caffeine. Honestly, the caffeine will still help, right? Because it will block the fatigue, but to what extent and for how long it's gonna block that fatigue is debatable, right? And obviously going to be super dependent on yourself and your response to caffeine, because the reality is that like the longer you take it, the more you become desensitized to it, right? A cup of coffee today, if you've been drinking it for 20 years, doesn't hit you like the first cup you had 20 years ago. It doesn't give you that same feeling. So, you know, the more essentially exposed you are to caffeine at higher levels of intake, the less it's going to blunt this fatigue response, the less, you know, you're going to get in terms of like the benefit from that, right? So that's something really important to understand, is that the juice is still coming from calories and carbs, but we can get that fatigue blocking response from the caffeine. And also a nice little other like side note, something to know about caffeine, is it does also help with fat metabolism, right? So it does help your body utilize more fat as a fuel source, more so when you're first getting into caffeine, it'll have more of an effect on that, but it does help the fat burn approach, right? So I actually do like caffeine a lot, obviously as a performance enhancer, something to blunt that fatigue response, but I also use it as maybe you get a nice little side benefit of like a little bit of extra fat metabolism along your day. If we're talking performance, again, calories, carbs, we can get the creatine and the alanine in the mix. That's going to really help us after we've taken it for about a month and take it continuously. And then caffeine is that thing where like I don't really know why you wouldn't utilize it if performance is your main goal, because there is such a known and dramatic benefit of blunting that fatigue response, helping you push harder in the gym. You're not getting tired as fast. You're not getting as sore as quickly. I think caffeine is kind of a no-brainer as long as you don't have a terrible response to it where you feel anxious or jittery, or it just messes with your head and you feel like you can't get the work in because you're too anxious and jittery. At that point, you might think about trying something that's got some L-theanine associated with it. So the L-theanine helps to take that jitter away. I think the easiest way to explain it is it balances out that rush you get from caffeine, so you don't get that jittery anxiety kind of type response. You just get like a really calm and cool kind of energy, and you ride that out for a few hours, obviously, as your body's metabolizing the caffeine. So from number 4 here, caffeine, absolutely. I think for performance, use it. If you don't have a good response to it, try it with some theanine, but you know, about 3 milligrams per kilogram, give that a shot. Also too, if you feel like you really don't do well on caffeine, maybe you just go with like 1 milligram per kilogram, you know, you just go with lighter levels of caffeine. That would be totally fine as well. You're still going to get a nice response. All right. Now we move on to number 5, last and final one here. The simplest performance enhancer that everyone forgets is hydration. This is crazy. But so many people just forget to hydrate all day long. And I notice myself doing it. You get to work, you get busy. By the end of the day, you realize you haven't had a sip of water all day long, right? For me, again, I'm 210 pounds, right? So even if I'm like a couple pounds down on dehydration because I haven't drank any water today, it's going to impact performance. It's going to impact cognition, coordination. So for anybody who's like doing a sport where you need coordination and you want to be very athletic, hydration is going to be the number one here. Even if we're just like me and you're the weekend warrior, the working stiff that still wants to feel like they could play if they got called back up, hydration's key for cognition, right? So for cognitive function, brain function, energy levels, if you're one of those people who's like hits the wall and feels super fatigued throughout the day, ask yourself the question how much water you've consumed. It sounds weird, but listen, I mean, 70% of your body's made of water. Every cell in your body, it needs to be hydrated properly to work properly and produce the most energy. So again, if you find like you are constantly dehydrated and you also find that you're constantly feeling fatigued and tired or a little foggy or whatever, hydration's probably the lowest hanging fruit. Start there. Start thinking about hydration before you start thinking about, oh, I have low blood sugar. Try drinking some water, honestly. It might make a world of difference. And then, if you are somebody who's performing at a high level, you're sweating a lot, maybe you're doing saunas, you're doing a lot of recovery stuff, training hard, whatever, you could get some electrolytes in the mix here as well, right? So, electrolytes, I wouldn't go crazy with them. If you wanted to really know how much electrolyte you need, you can buy the one that I've used with people is called a Nix biosensor. It's pretty cool. You just like stick it on your arm and it collects your sweat as you train, and then it tells you your sweat composition, right? So it tells you if you're a salty sweater, it tells you if you're losing more water while you're training, and then it also measures sweat rate, so you'll know, okay, you're losing liter of water every 2 hours or something like that when you run on the treadmill. Make sure that you want to tailor your electrolyte consumption to whatever's going on with that exercise, right? So like if I go for a run in 95-degree heat or something and I monitor my sweat rate, but I don't typically do that form of exercise, it's going to say, yeah, you need, a liter of water every hour. You need element, 1,200 milligrams of sodium every hour, blah, blah, blah. But if I'm most days just in the gym, just pushing weights and barely sweating, you don't need that for that form of exercise, right? So the cool thing about the biosensor is that you can use it in the various forms of exercise that you do most frequently, and then you can learn. So I learn on a day where I'm doing more like heavy cardio or like plyometric and that type of thing where I'm sweating a lot. Maybe I need some amount of electrolyte. And then if I'm just going to the gym and I'm just pumping weights or something like that, I probably don't need it, right? So I think electrolytes, rather than just blanket like drinking all this salt and stuff every day, it's probably a better situation either just to save it for like heavy sweating, or if you're going into a sauna, you literally just buy the biosensor. It's like $100 and something and you get a few of these sensors, and you put them on, you learn a little bit about your sweat rate and your sweat composition, and you can move forward there, right? So the easiest thing I always say with hydration is you want to get about a half your body weight in ounces. So start there. That's kind of like blanket statement, half your body weight in ounces. But really what you want to do is literally just make sure you're peeing on a regular basis and make sure that when you're peeing, it's mostly clear. So obviously the darker the pee is getting, the more dehydrated you are, right? If you're peeing every 20 minutes and it's totally clear, you're also overhydrated, and that can be a problem as well because that messes with your electrolyte status on both ends, right? A lot of people will hammer water all day long, and then you're actually creating hyponatremia, like you don't have enough salt and stuff, right? You're creating electrolyte imbalances there. The big thing is just finding the sweet spot, right? Drink enough water that you're peeing every couple hours and it's pretty much clear. If you can do that and you feel well and you're hydrated, then you're probably in a good spot. When you're sweating a ton or you're doing, saunas and things like that, get an electrolyte in the mix. Don't overdo it. Don't go crazy. Also, it's going to depend on blood pressure status. If you are someone with higher blood pressure, maybe you do an electrolyte that has a little less sodium. You don't do the elements and things like that have 1,000 milligrams per serving. You'd go to something that maybe has like half of that, right? And then that way you manage your sodium intake a little bit, but you still get some electrolytes to help hydrate your cells, right? Last but not least, whether you're an athlete, weekend warrior, chasing PRs, leading teams in a high stress job, chasing kids, or just trying to dominate day-to-day life, performance matters. If you're like me at all, performance matters every day. There's not a single day I wake up that I don't want to be the best version of myself, whether that's in the gym, whether that's with my wife, whether that's at work. Like, I hold myself to a high standard. I understand at this point that living at a high standard and holding yourself to a high standard, you need to have a nourished and hydrated body. So I think these are 5 ways we can simply do it. You're going to crush the gym, you're going to crush outside the gym, you'll feel amazing, and that's the key to the equation here, right? Is it's not just about having the biggest biceps or pecs or strongest squat or whatever. It's really about like maximizing your daily output in terms of just quality of life and your ability to put 110 into whatever's sitting in front of you throughout the day. I think this is a great way to kind of put yourself into that next gear. And have said forever since I started to do this when I was 20 years old and now I'm 39. The biggest thing that got me into nutrition was I hit a gear that I didn't know I had. I started eating a little bit better and all of a sudden I just felt like I had this next gear and I was like, holy shit, where did this come from? I feel amazing. I wake up, I'm bouncing out of bed, I'm feeling great. I'm working construction 8 to 10 hours a day, shoveling dirt, and I've got energy to hit the gym right after that. You know, mind you, I was 20 years old at this point, so there's that as well. But even now, the way I feel every day, the way my body responds to my training, I attribute a lot of that to the focus that I put on nutrition and hydration and supplementation, and it allows me to have a high level of output in the gym and outside of the gym every day. So if that's what you're after, I think these 5 things we reviewed today will be super helpful, and hope you find it the same. So any questions or anything, you can reach out anytime. Wherever you're consuming this, just leave a comment on the bottom, or feel free just to reach out through social media or email me or whatever, and always happy to help you optimize your performance, maximize your output in life. All right, so everybody have an awesome day, and we'll catch you on the next one.